Hello, everybody. OCD Mikey Hi-Fi Guy here again with another installment of listening like an audiophile and how a pro audiophile or a pro, somebody with a lot of experience, however you want to call it, listens to hi-fi and how to determine the difference between good audio systems and just regular old Best Buy type crap or just cheap hi-fi. What I'm going to go over today is something called Soundstage. Some people asked me in the other videos to go over Soundstage because they didn't really understand what Soundstage meant. And you hear that a lot. You hear about the Soundstage now. So let me explain this and I'll do it quick and to the point. The Soundstage, okay, is when you close your eyes, okay, and you're listening to the system. First of all, you're either going to have a soundstage or you're not going to have a soundstage. Okay, so not having a soundstage is going to sound like when you close your eyes, all the music instruments, the vocals, the drums, everything is going to be flat and two-dimensional. You're going to hear it from side to side, but it's going to be flat. There's going to be no depth, okay? The soundstage is, imagine if you will, that you're at a show, you're at a, I'm just going to give you a scenario. You're at a show in a small club setting, okay, and you're up front and somewhat, and there's different, you've got the stage. The stage is deep, right? It's got a drummer at the back. It's got the bass guy on the left. It's got the lead guitarist on the right. It's got maybe a keyboard guy far right. It's set up in a certain manner, okay? And the sound that you hear is going to it's going to have a dimension of width and depth, okay? It's definitely not going to sound flat. Music is going to be coming from different, if you close your eyes, it'll be coming from different depths and different widths and areas. So what happens is when you have a good soundstage in an audio system, if you close your eyes, it's three-dimensional sound, okay? When you close your eyes, you can envision a three-dimensional layout of a stage, okay? You're going to hear the drummers behind the vocalist. You're going to hear the vocalist up front and dead nuts center, and they're going to lift off that background. The vocalist is absolutely going to be separate from the background. If you can't hear a difference in depth between the vocal and the drums, you have no soundstage, okay? And width. So usually a soundstage is defined in terms of its width and depth. People will say wide, deep soundstage. That's kind of all-encompassing. If you say wide, deep soundstage, pretty much you've got soundstage nailed, okay? If you say three-dimensional, deep, wide soundstage, it pretty much that nails it. Now, keep in mind, reviewers and jokers will throw out three-dimensional, deep, wide soundstage as they just throw it out like they're giving candy at Halloween. Some people are more prudent with using those terms, and other people are very loose with using those terms. And that is when learning your reviewer comes into play. Because you can go, that guy says everything's wide, deep soundstage. He says everything has velvety black background, okay? These are terms that are often overused. So keep that, even though the terms mean something, and they are valuable terms, a lot of times people use that, and especially dealers that are trying to sell stuff that have no skills on how to sell, they're going to use the coined terms. You're going to hear them use it over and over. Velvety black background, wide, deep soundstage. Even though wide, deep soundstage is something that is real and desirable, keep in mind it's a very commonly overused term, okay? So when you're talking about soundstage, what you're talking about is your aural, A-U-R-A-L, not O-R-A-L, okay? Your aural, your ear sense of dimension, okay? So when you're doing a 3D blueprint in your head of the layout of the band and you've got locations all locked in, That's your judgment of the soundstage. It will be very dimensional. A good audio system brings out this three-dimensional soundstage to the point where when it's really good, you can't tell the difference between you are locked. There is no better sensory cues in terms of location of things than having a extremely well dialed and apparent soundstage. So again, it's a three-dimensional thing. It's a visual thing that is like in your mind's eye, right? It's something that it's the imaginary stage that you create in your room, your listening room. You create this sound stage, which is very much like the actual stage at the show. And that is what we're talking about when we say sound stage. And we are going to talk about it in terms of width and depth. Some sound stages are really narrow. That's something that I find that bugs the shit out of me. In many systems, people that don't quite get how to set up systems will put their speakers close together and the soundstage will be very narrow. It may be deep, but it's narrow and it sounds, you don't hear anything to the left and right of the speakers. It's just the whole soundstage is maintained in between the two speakers. That's no good. The soundstage needs to go beyond the speakers to the left and the right to a limitless, seemingly limitless expanse of width. It just goes into darkness. And the depth should be just deeper. It should go deeper than your front wall. Okay, the front wall is the wall behind your speakers. The depth of the soundstage should go behind that wall. Like that wall isn't even there. Like if you close your eyes, it's like you have no front wall, you have no side walls. You can't hear them because it's just like the space goes off forever. That is a really wide open soundstage. And that is what we're looking for in killer hi-fi, is we're looking for a well-defined, a spatially accurate, and deep and wide soundstage. Something that is boundless, something that is boundaryless is the best type of soundstage. Sometimes, and if you're in a smaller room and you have reflections, you have walls, you simply bring the speakers closer to you into more of a near field situation where you can get that same huge soundstage with no walls. You just have to bring the speakers closer to you in a smaller room to get that. In a big room, you put them far apart, man, and you make this whole wall of sound. If your speakers are tall and they're planar, you can still put them wide apart in a small room, put them far wide apart, tow them in, and you'll throw a soundstage in the middle of the speakers, and you won't be echolocating to the speakers at all. They will cast a ghost image right into the middle of the room where there is no speaker. Then you know you're doing some good sound staging and some good imaging. Imaging ties in with sound staging. What imaging is imaging, in the best way for me to put this, is the ability for you to visualize the soundstage. Okay, so they go hand in hand. Imaging and soundstage definitely go hand in hand, because if your system isn't imaging, it will have no soundstage. If your system has a killer soundstage, killer deep, wide, real soundstage, it is going to be imaging killer. So the imaging is the ability to cast that soundstage. And again, they go hand in hand, imaging and soundstage. So that is what we talk about when we're talking about imaging. We're talking about soundstage. We're talking about a three-dimensional depiction of the stage, of the sonic, of the band, if you will. Now, in something like, say, techno music, okay, where you've got a lot of pulses and glitch and things like that, you're not really going to be listening for soundstage in that kind of music. You will hear panning, left, right, panning. You can hear different things where it brings it down, like something envelops and it goes down and then it comes up. So there's different sound forms that you get, like from electronic music, which isn't the same as like live music imaging. Live music imaging is going to be like watching a live band, but when you're listening to something like let's say studio recorded stuff, you're going to hear the locations of everything. With studio recorded music where they're singing and playing guitar and so forth, there's very specific locations of those instruments. And you're going to definitely hear those locations, and they'll be separate, but there'll be layers, okay? So layering is probably another good term. Layering of instruments, instrument placement means like where the instruments are. This is all part of imaging and soundstage. It's all contained in the visual spatial depiction of what you're hearing, okay? Because a good, terrific hi-fi system is going to give you spatial depth cues, instrument placement, and soundstage. So I just thought I'd take this quick time to go over soundstage for you guys that are wondering, like, what do they mean by soundstage? What is imaging? What's instrument layering, instrument placement? How does it all tie together? All those things tie together. Instrument placement is the location of the instruments. You hear distinct areas, distinct locations of instruments. When you really get good, you're going to hear behind those instruments. Okay? And the people that know good hi-fi understand what I mean when we say they sound round. Something sounds round, or it's like an orb. You hear the guitar over there, but you can hear behind the guitar, and you can hear the edges almost of it. So the instruments become, it's part of three-dimensionality. You can hear behind them, okay? And that has to do with the layering. These things all go together. But the bottom line is you can take all these terms that I've talked about, put them all into one thing, which is the visual, mind's eye, spatial depiction of what you're listening to. You should have a very rich, three-dimensional, spatial representation of what you're listening to. It should absolutely not be just one flat wall of sound that has no cues of depth or instrument placement, that is like a wash of stuff. That is crappy audio, okay? It just sounds like a washboard of music all just blended together, and all just like you took paints and smeared them, okay? This is the sculpture now, where everything takes form and gets front and back and side, and you can hear behind them, and there's layering, and all that kind of stuff. So I know it's a lot to grasp, but I can tie it all up into one thing, which I've said probably twice already, which is the spatial depiction of what you're listening to. That encompasses layering, soundstage, imaging, and all that stuff. So hopefully this helps. See you.